Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of The Growth Show. This show, if it's your first time joining us, this is around leadership, great leaders, great businesses, and helping people improve in every way they can. I'm joined today with an amazing panel of David Berkeley and Tom Pickering. We're going to go through communication and how to improve communication in your teams, something that is incredibly current right now. So David, let's talk communication.
Cool. Where do you want to start?
Where should we start? How in a team dynamic, how can we improve communication in a team dynamic?
Yeah, I think, well, let's start with the ABCs. I think effective communication is always two-way. The number of times I've worked with a sort of senior leader and they said, yeah, I've been really, really clear on what to do. I've told them like 10 times. They've told them 10 times in exactly the same way. And then they haven't got it right. They haven't listened to what the person's been trying to communicate. So first of all, communication is a two-way street. So it's not just about you telling people what to do. It's also listening to them as to how they're going to do it. That will increase most people's productivity and efficiency significantly if they're not doing that already. And it sounds really stupid. I know loads of people who go, yeah, I do that all the time. I tell them what to do and I say, if you've got any questions, let me know. That's not communication. So I think just spending time with people, get them to talk it back to you, get them to talk through how they're going to do it. And then if you can see potential problems with that, that's when you can come in and ask questions around it, saying, oh, well, what would happen if this would happen? Instead of just telling people using your vast experience what the answer is, you could start sort of asking some questions and kind of leading people through to an answer. So that would be my kind of letter A of the alphabet of improving communications, is to make it a two-way street. Perfect.
And Tom, for you, we're just going to bounce around on this one. For you to expand on that, what would you add on that?
I was talking about something, thinking about something slightly different. I think that it starts off, do we care about others, Nick? Because if we don't naturally care about others, and when we're stressed, we don't naturally care about others, our natural default is to look after ourselves, then the chance of us communicating or having conversations is very low. I think that's, and again, just to be blatantly in your face, it's the first part of the Winning Thinking program. And the challenge for that is actually taking new actions in that space. Okay, so it's not just, you can't say, look, listen, right? Listen to what, you can't say that, it just doesn't work. You've got to experience what it's like to put someone first and actually step over the edge. And this is all about taking new action. And it's actually about experiencing that person actually can help you, for example, if you're a bit stressed, and actually just experience that they have a really worthwhile contribution if you just give them a chance. So I think the other side about conversation, being able to have a good conversation is actually about eliciting a response, right? So I think if it's a lot of communication online at the moment, LinkedIn stuff is automated, and you've got to ask the question: does that person on the other end care? And they simply don't. They don't take the right degree of interest, and so I think it's about taking the time to listen. It's not listening for what you want to listen to or wish to listen for. It's about listening and switching off. And again, that is something that is, again, in my experience, requires people to take new action, take different perspectives. And perspectives like, my mentor for the last 15 years has said something to me that is actually practicing, enjoying what somebody's going to say next, rather than, focusing on how you're going to respond or your own thoughts. And I think that is critical to giving people that time and that love but it's something that starts, Nick, with, do you care about other people at all? And I think in this climate, the reality is, particularly with social media, and as it's quite a stressful time on a number of fronts, and it's not going to go away, Nick, not going to go away, it's going to get more challenging. We've got to step over the edge, we've got to start putting people first. And I don't say that from a light and fluffy perspective. I say that from a perspective of company turnaround perspective, because the one thing that holds businesses together when things are falling to pieces is something called love, right? And the way that manifests itself in a very simple way in a business and putting people first. And if you don't, you fundamentally get unpredictable results. So you might well think you know better, but actually trust me, when things get really difficult, that's some of the things I found that are 100% robust, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I think so. That point is, if we don't fundamentally care to start with, we're not even listening, right? We're not even engaging the other person. We're not going to make any effort towards it. So David, once we've established, hopefully, the majority of people listening to this do care about the team surrounding them. If not, we've got sort of deeper problems. Once we've established the fact we care and we want to sort of listen, how can we best sort of encourage more communication, sort of more debate amongst the teams?
I think it'd be going just to get to know the person as a person, and what actually makes people tick. I think to do that, I mean, it's the heart of empathy, isn't it? To really understand somebody and where they're coming from, and to really, it's the easiest way to pick up kind of, I talk about it with my clients, of kind of making deposits in the relational capital bank. The more you get to know people and what makes them tick and how you can build that relationship, the stronger that relationship is going to be, and it'll actually help really caring for them. If someone's always kind of getting a bit twitchy about having meetings after 5 o'clock, and you're getting more and more annoyed because you're getting deadlines to hit or whatever, and you find out that they've actually got to take care of a relative, or they've got to cook for their younger siblings who they look after, or something like that, that's going to completely change how you interact with them, and how you get the best out of them, and actually how they bring the best. And so I think just taking that time to get to know people on a deep level just is a worthwhile investment in any team.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about now is people look to try, and you don't want to start having a relationship when things are going bad. You've sort of missed the value of having a relationship right by then. And it goes the same for getting to know your sort of peers in the industry, and just creating those friends, especially during the perceived good times, right? That's when people just usually double down and actually lose relationships because they're doing so well and they're so proud of what they've achieved. But actually, that's the time you're going to be building relationships where things go wrong, right? If it's press contacts in there, if it's regulatory people you need there, if it's the guy in Hong Kong who you haven't interacted with, who could cross-sell better to you and your business and sort of building a product. And I think that is dearly missed by people. And I know from my own personal experience of when things have been sort of tough, having that network, which for 7 years, frankly, there was no sort of value from it, right? We just other than in pure enjoyment of getting to know each other. But then when in tough times, you can call upon people who are just so willing to help and advise and sort of help you get through those sort of times. So I would add, my 2p's worth here would just be, stop looking for sort of immediate return on investment. If you're approaching communication and relationship purely from a return on investment point of view, you're going to lose, right? You can't value the strength of a good relationship until you're in a moment to really find out, and from experience, they're priceless. And make for a much more fun working environment. Tom, would you correct me if I'm wrong there? Would you agree with that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, I think that. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I think it's good. I think I'd add a few things. I think what does good look like? What good looks like is what we shy away from, Nick. I think so, which is a challenging but respectful conversation. So if you and I are going to you and I are fundamentally different, even though may have certain things in common. And I think if we're going to, when we're talking to each other, we've got to learn our different perspectives, and they can be black and white. And actually, how can we continue that discussion if we have a black and white challenge, Nick? Because I think a lot of people, there's a slight downside in what you just said, that we avoid those things, okay, as leaders, or we're too busy, or we'll do that next week, but we don't ever have that conversation, Nick, because it might be, and the classic one is not talking about religion and politics. And yet probably religion and politics have actually got a lot of, and that's a classic mantra. But actually, we've got to get comfortable with having difficult conversations. I think the other thing with regards to social media, it's sort of bit one-upmanship, I think. And I think the difficulty with some conversations is they become sort of nice and gratuitous, but meaningless, right? In the hope that some magic's going to rub off on you, a bit like sort of inviting Richard Branson to the Growth Show, great, but actually, who are the real heroes? As you know, are they the poor people who have nothing, or is it Richard Branson? And actually, are we interested in listening to the poor person who's really, entrepreneurial and driving and carry on regardless to look after their kids, or Richard Branson, floating about in his island? Who's the hero, Nick? And so, where's our starting point? And in engaging with the mode of engagement is totally different in those two situations if you think about it, because our expectations are completely different in terms of what we might get out of that conversation. So the other thing I think is text. You can't have a conversation on text because there's no two-way communication. So I have actually banned email in organizations when I've run businesses. And I said, look, if there's a discussion or conversation to be had, pick up the phone and then use email to confirm that discussion. The other thing is to make sure the right quorum are present on that discussion, because it's very easy to make unchecked decisions. And that's not with regards to undermining accountability, but actually reinforcing accountability. And people may have a view on X, Y, Z, a bit like I've got a view on some of the things and you have a view on some of the things I do in it, which is great. But actually, it's up to you and I to make our own decisions based on that information. So I think, in its simplest form, when we're listening, we almost need to have a blank sheet of paper, a clear mind, so we're not overcome with our own thoughts. And that requires practice. And yet, you've only got to look at, my household in the evening, we're all sat on iPads in different parts of the house. I'm normally the one, actually, I don't listen to the TV much, but, and I think we've got to practice this. We've got to get good at this. And I think, at its simplest level, if we're not listening and taking interest in other people, there's actually no conversation going on. You've got to almost ask the question, what on earth is happening? And I think, I think as well, there's this thing about our natural default position, which is almost automatic, which is occurring far too often, where someone says something to us, they get labelled and post-boxed or get defriended on Facebook or whatever. And this is just tragic, because it's actually those people who actually are the people who make things happen, and they're getting marginalised. And you've got to ask the question, actually. And actually, coming back to the Bible, and speaking as a Christian openly, there's a lot of Jesus spoke a lot of wisdom on this stuff, and he said, and it just knocks you away. You can't argue with anything that Jesus said. He said, before someone was going to get stoned for adultery, he said, okay, a load of self-righteous fools, just like the same sort of fools, self-righteous people on social media, They said, well, whoever's without sin, throw the first stone, right? And that just stopped them all in their tracks. And I think we do need to go back to basics. And I think that said, I think that by the same token, in terms of social media, it's an opportunity. I use it, LinkedIn, to basically see if there's a connection. Then I pick up the phone to have a conversation with someone. The alternative also that I do, which I hope I'm respectful, if I have quite a few people that contact me and ask me for help on things, I'm very clear and I say no, which is actually, if you have zero interest in something, particularly in a business context, you don't have to engage in the discussion. So I spend a lot of my time actually saying no to things when I just don't have any interest, and I think that should be made clear rather than pursuing a conversation. So anyway, Nick, this is one of my favourite topics, so I'll leave it there for the moment.
Okay, perfect. Well, David, so let's go on to the sort of the now about the challenge of remote working and how we're going to try and encourage sort of communication there. Have you got any thoughts on how we can be better remotely?
Yeah, it's a brilliant new challenge, isn't it, that so many people are facing, and having daily conversations about it with clients in lots of different settings. I think one of the things that business has done before is bigger is better, which isn't necessarily not always true. And I think at the moment, probably having smaller teams who communicate more effectively together with really clear outcomes of what they're trying to achieve is going to really help things. So instead of having 20, 30 people on a Zoom call, where most of the people are going to be, on Instagram or, watching the sport in the background or something and not really engaged. Having some small groups of people who really kind of work well and effectively together with clear outcomes can be a great way to improve communication, not least because we've probably all been on Zoom calls with 30, 40 people, and it's impossible to have any kind of productive conversation, even just that relationship bit, but also spending the vast majority of time listening to other people takes a lot of energy. So having smaller groups of people with clearer outcomes, I think would be definitely a positive step forward. I think creating time in the diary for just get to know you chats, and Zoom is brilliant, I love it, or Google Meets or whatever. It is very sort of clinical, isn't it? People come on, they go, right, meeting starting at 9, right, so first point, boom. And you don't have those chats that you would do if you get there a couple of minutes early. You just sat down and you have a chat with someone, how was your weekend? You don't have the chats as you walk off to get a coffee at the end or something. And so I think we need to work really, really hard at sort of creating time to get to know people and investing in people, and not just making the kind of the communication we do have via video and all these amazing technologies being just purely functional, not relational.
Yeah, I love the idea of carving out time or lack of interruptions, right?
Yeah.
So you actually know you've got some dedicated time to think around a challenge or try and recreate a water cooler moment, right? Which is key. And from a leader's point of view, we've been so driven on efficiencies that sometimes these ideas seem efficient, but actually it's actually where the creativity comes from, right? Those little we have it offline, just little sparks about a biking business or whatever it is, and next thing you know, we're pulling value within 5 minutes of those random moments. But I definitely think to the leaders listening into this, like carving time, just half an hour of uninterrupted time where you can put people together, and also realizing that a lot of your teams are not going to just naturally reach out to each other. They've got fairly used to operating fairly solo for a while, and a lot of people not programmed that way. Like my best friend, I proactively phone once a year because I just don't know how to do the whole how are you conversation. I don't see it as an efficient conversation. I love meeting them, and we're best chums when we're together. But I've had to sort of learn that this is the world we're in now. So I actually do need to just go like, hey, I phoned you just for a random chat, which is sort of new to me in that sort of sequence. But it's also made me realise that everyone else is quite similar to that at times, and you've got to create these siloed bubbles to give people opportunity just to talk and connect and cross-sell and share ideas and just sort of stay connected. So, but I think that interruption point is absolutely key. Like showing you value those connections by carving time.
Yeah. And in a sort of organizational setting, you might have had a big team meeting. You might have spoken to somebody, Nick, and they might not have liked it. And when you're together physically in the same building, they can come up to you later, knock on the door and go, hey, Nick, can you just grab 2 minutes? I just didn't, the way you spoke to me at the end of that meeting, I just didn't quite like it or whatever. Nobody's going to do that on Zoom. Just go, oh, by the way, just sorry, could I just, before we all log off, that really annoyed me what you said that, and then log off. It's a very easy way to kind of do that, but nobody was ever going to do it. Well, no. Nobody in Britain anyway, it was too British. But it's really hard to have those kind of human connections, and those things kind of fester. We're in our own little world, our own little bubbles, our own homes. And so having time for that, even just having a time in a diary when you can go, this is 20 minutes I've got free, you can book that time. Anyone in the company can book 15 minutes with me if they need to have a chat with something, or just ping me an email to say, I want to have a chat with you, and we can make time for it. I think the other thing particularly with new people joining a company, I was speaking to somebody last night and they've had, I think, 8 new hires during lockdown. They said, functionally, brilliant, relationally, horrific. Like, how do you actually get to know people in a team and get to know them? And I think, let's use some of the technology that we have, the sort of the Just Eats, the Deliveroos and all that kind of thing. Buy somebody lunch for 15 quid. Find out what kind of food they like. That'd be an interesting conversation starter. Order them some lunch, get it delivered to their home, and then have lunch with them. Have half an hour just over lunch, as you probably would do with a new hire in the office, and use that kind of stuff. We've got the technology there. Why don't we just harness it?
Yeah. We do those meal boxes, you know, with the create your own sort of meal sort of thing delivered to your door. Because it's really hard. Like, you can maintain a culture if you've got existing people, but creating new cultures remotely is intense. And just getting, you know, virtual poker going on, where you can see each other and at least have some form of banter or anything. It's a real challenge. And then you can do this stuff once, but keeping it fresh is even more.
The freshness.
More of a challenge.
On that freshness point, if I may, Nick, I think what I'm doing, I'm always looking. I describe the organisation as a vehicle, and the vehicle changes to suit the train. So the people are very fearful about, you know, it's quite natural. I'm very, very comfortable with teams, very comfortable, even very difficult teams, very comfortable. A lot of people aren't, because it's new relationships, and that's actually quite in the difficult category, although it's not talked about. So you actually have to make slots. So I describe the vehicle, and then I create slots, and people, you know, work together in those slots, and then I work to make sure that conversation and dialogue is productive and the right people are involved, and try to check the right decisions are being made. And, you know, not that I know any better, but they're just creating the right structure for that. So I think you do need to do that. I think it doesn't just happen. And I think when it comes to redefining culture, you've got to re-ascertain, because in an aerospace business, or any sort of business, that, you know, the challenge changes, and to redefine that actually means you need to step into different groups and you know, speak to different people. And again, that doesn't happen. And I think what you both just said about making time for that informal communication, I think that's absolutely critical, you know. And I think I do it quite often, actually, after a Zoom call or something. I say, hold on a minute, I didn't quite get what you were saying there, but can we just have a chat, just to make sure that actually we might not agree, or might not have the same view, but I just wanted to check in to make sure you're okay with what I said, or I wanted to understand what you said, just to get that understanding. And it's about, but I come back to the point, it's about caring about other people, Nick. It's not about caring about ourselves and our own feelings. It's fundamentally, do we care about other people? That's absolute starting point of this. So I think, you know, anybody that doesn't start with that starting point, I'd hazard caution, because and one way to do that is to change people's actions. And then when you change people's actions, that's experiential learning, and then they think, well, that's okay, you know. And I think that's one way of doing it. I spend a lot of time gently, or not so gently, well, however, to change people's actions, but largely by trying to change my own behavior, actually, to adjust and show some sort of example. But I think it's not to be underestimated in terms of this challenge. It's very, very fluid, and online, I think, makes it a whole lot more difficult. And you know, we've got to speak to each other. It's speaking. Text is absolutely, I mean, you can just tell with the dialogue we have between ourselves, you know, our text dialogue, it's almost impossible to understand where people are coming from, you know, and you don't have that, you know, human connection in the same way. So
yeah. So chalk and cheese, right? Like, there's not many conversations where I would choose to do a thumbs up if I'm talking to someone. You know, when text, it's my go-to thing of like, yep, that's it. You know, it's a very you know, I'm emotionally less connected to a text message, right? And I'm sort of a brilliant reply on to the next thing, rather than sort of stopping and pausing and engaging sort of properly, which is an issue there. And my big takeaway from this today, actually, is coming back to David's point of the siloed approach, which I think is great. And I think a lot of good businesses have got into that small, direct communication paths where they're very, very connected in their team of 5, 10, whatever it might be, and that's working really efficiently. From my seat as the CEO, what I always worry about is, like, how is the larger groups connected? Because we could get more sort of siloed. And actually, a big point for me to probably work on in the next week or so is going to be, I guess, cross-pollination. You know, like maybe taking some challenges we have in the business and getting little working groups of people who maybe don't interact as often, to see if we can just reconnect people and have people coming at it from sort of different different ideas and different sort of angles.
That's what I mean by the vehicle, Nick, to change that vehicle, to get that cross-pollination to adjust to the challenge. You have to create, it's almost like, I think it's helpful to look at a hierarchy, organizational structure, and think how should that communication work? But it doesn't just happen. You've got to create an opportunity for people to do that.
Yeah, and I think having some champions in the business who can pick up certain areas, right? You know, like maybe relieve you of the social pressures and actually just say, look, you put something together here and go from that. I think would be good fun there. David, any sort of closing statement or idea for you around this topic?
I think probably just think about making deposits of relational capital. To kind of pick up on what you said, it's not during the bad times. That's often where the bad times you've got to go and make a big withdrawal from a relationship, and there's nothing in the bank because you haven't spoken to them for 3 years, and suddenly you go, oh, could you introduce me to your mates? And someone's like, why? Yeah, why would I help you now? You haven't been there for me when I've needed you, and that's the worst position to be in. So I think just with relationships, just make little deposits, little and often. I can't remember the exact quote, and this is really going to annoy me. I was trying to do it with the client estate. It was, people won't remember how you, remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And I think it's so transparent when you go to somebody and you want something, and it's so unattractive. And yet when you want something and someone's there because you've helped them 9 times out of, you've been there the last 9 times and helped them, they'll be desperate to help you the next time around, or at least the right kind of people you want to build relationships would be. And so I think just make those deposits in the relational capital bank. Absolutely.
I think that is said much more gracefully than I said it, but I think that is so important. It's unbelievable. Well, thank you chaps for today, and thank you massively for everyone at home. If you're listening to us on Spotify, come and find us on YouTube. Be one of our 6,000 subscribers, which is brilliant. Also, you get to see our faces. If you're bored of our faces on YouTube, come and join us on Spotify. And I sound a lot better than I look, so you might enjoy that one a bit more there. But otherwise, thank you so much to everyone at home. We will see you next week. Now we've baited Richard Branson, we'll see if we get him on, and looking forward to catching up with you all soon. All the best. Goodbye.